right, in 3, 2, 1. Hello. Hello everyone, this is Jake Light, gaming lawyer at your service, real life lawyer as well. So right now we're doing a live seminar sort of thing, and if for people that are going to be watching my YouTube channel, this is a live seminar, a pre-recorded live seminar. All right, so I've been receiving some comments saying that I should reduce the length of this sort of videos, but unfortunately, yeah, I have to point out that this was live at some point. So live videos, I generally don't have time. If I had time, I would have reduced it, but not nowadays. It's more or less this is the thing that I do. So yeah, but in any case, I've taken heed on some of the comments, and I'll try to make this as short as possible. But I'm not going to be I can't guarantee that, because I might trail off, or people might start asking me questions, and I might trail off as well from there. But yeah, in general, I should probably improve on that in any case. But yes, today's legal investigations, we'll be talking about the employment stuff, right? As the title says, brief guide on employment rights from hiring to termination. So we are not exactly looking at any certain laws, but from my experience, as well as from the people that I've talked to, that they were seeking some sort of a guidance, some sort of help in terms of their problems with their working. Yeah, I've even if while I'm working, while not working, a lot of friends, family have approached me to ask me for advice in how to deal with certain situations that they are encountering while they are working. And a lot of them are actually quite common, and I would say also preventable if you know your basic stuff, right? You don't actually have to know any laws per se. You just have to know what is supposed to be the right thing to do, what's supposed to be sounds very sus, as they say, right? And as long as you know that, you can easily identify when a boss, when a company, when an employer does something that is unreasonable, that is unfair, or that is illegal even. So that's what we're doing today. We're going to be talking about it in brief, all right? So I've done a bit of a writing here, and people are probably reading a bit of it. But yes, the way I'm doing this live seminar is like any contract, like any story, right? Like any people's life, there's always a beginning and an end, no matter what it is, right? Like a relationship, there's always a beginning, there's always during the relationship what you should be doing, what's happening, all that, and how a relationship will eventually end. So I would say that's a good analogy in respect of these things, because getting hired by a company, you have a boss, you're an employee, you have a relationship between your boss. So, but rather than being a girlfriend, a boyfriend, or a husband or wife, the relationship is more professional. So there are things that you might probably should be expecting or not expecting in a actual relationship with your husband, or with your wife, or with your girlfriend, boyfriend, or partner. So anyhow, so this is how this live seminar is going to be done. So we're going to be, of course, talking about at the beginning, when you are going to get hired, right? When you're hired, what is the things that you should probably look for, be careful of. So yeah, before getting employed, as I said here, first thing you need to know is that your employer should be providing you a contract or an agreement detailing everything about your job. So this is the number one thing that I always tell people, is to get a contract provided by your company, provided by your boss, right? I don't think it has never happened. All right, I don't think it's a thing that employee drafts their own contract. I think it has always been the employer, the company, that provides a semi template for employees to sign. Normally that's the case, right? Normally that is the case. That's fine, right? As long as there's a contract, then that is a good start. If there is no contract, and after you had an interview or something like that, they just tell you to come by to the office, come by to whatever working premise that you need to be working at, that's not a good sign. Or at least that means that you're, if let's say you're from United States, then it's called at will employment. And I think that's a very unique thing in United States in terms of this is actually acceptable, where you don't need a contract to work in any place, even though, as far as I know, the employment laws in the United States are not that protective, are not that in favor of employees, right? Of course, you have your discrimination laws right? Discrimination laws, all that stuff, but it's not enough. That only covers one part of a aspect of a job. There's so many things that we need to consider when we're working. It's not just about not being discriminated and having the freedom to do whatever you want. There are things that we need to put it down in writing. So yeah, right here, of course, the contract is good and everything, but you also need to know what is supposed to be inside the contract. If a contract is given to you and there's not much inside is written in it, it's useless as well, right? It's useless. But better than nothing, I guess. But of course, I've listed out a few things that I think should be inside a basic contract, right? Like over here, I've listed, these are all these examples, right? I would say they have to be there, or sometimes, depending on your job, some certain things they won't list out, of course. I'm talking about employment benefits, but everything else, is, I would say, compulsory. It must be contained inside any employment contract, right? First off, we have salary, wage per weekly or monthly. So first off, yeah, definitely we need to know how much you're getting paid for this work, for this job, right? Whether you are paid weekly or paid monthly, it has to be written over there. And of course, this is something that I don't think I have to emphasize anywhere, but employers do, if they put in salary, they should also put in things like when they should be paying, at what consistency they should be paying, right? Normally in a contract, salaries would put in, say, salaries are paid on a if it's a monthly basis, then they should be paid within like the first 7 days of a calendar month or something like that. So yeah, that's something probably should be aware of, because sometimes employers just like to pay their workers anytime they like, or just give any reason they like to pay you. Like, oh, we're not earning as much, so we're deferring the payment to maybe in next month even, or most of the time maybe in 2 weeks of a calendar month. But that's something that is not normal, and depending on the country, they may be able to do that for very specific reasons, right? Very specific reasons they can do that. But normally, if employers start paying you inconsistently, that's a bad sign, and it's considered, if they put it inside a contract, if they had that contract, if they say they have to pay you within how many days or something like that, and if they don't, that's a breach of contract, right? Right, next is job responsibilities. Very important as well. Although most of the employment contracts that I've seen, that I have owned myself, my own contracts, they are quite general. They are quite broad. But as broad as they are, right, there are certain things that are obvious that your job responsibilities don't cover, right? If your job is to work in a office and you're supposed to do clerical work, and most of the work is done on computer, I don't think you're expected to do anything else that is not on the computer, right? Like cleaning the office, or like making sure the food supplies of the office supplies are sufficient, or maybe other things like maintenance you have to look into, or anything like that in regards for the company. No, you probably will not expect to do any of those things if your job description or job responsibilities is solely on working on the computer, right? So that's the obvious ones, right? But then again, that's it from experience. I should have been more how do you say, savvy or smarter or wiser. My first job, when my internship, even though I was doing an apprenticeship or chambering for a law firm, I did not just do like legal stuff or legal practice or anything like that. I actually cleaned the office, trim, cut down tree branches, be a chauffeur, a driver for the bosses. I did a whole bunch of different things. I even sent gift wrappers. How do you say, gift baskets to clients or potential clients, or all sorts of people. I did that as well. So yeah, do take note. You don't have to do any of those things, right? You don't have to do any of those things if your job responsibility or your job descriptions doesn't say any of those, right? If you don't do any of those stuff, it doesn't mean if, let's say, you were instructed by your boss to do so, it doesn't mean you've breached the contract or anything, right? Because good thing we have a contract, right? So anyways, moving on. My internship in a nutshell. Yes, I think that's everyone's internship, but unfortunately when we start working, we have no idea, we have no clue what actually working is like most of the time. So and a lot of times is we need the experience, we need the portfolio, the reputation, so that after leaving the company, you have a good resume for other people, for other companies to look at. But yeah. Oh, hello, Waltz. There will be ad hoc any urgent tasks required by the supervisor bits in the job scope. Yeah, I mean, there will always be something like that. Like, oh, you need to do any additional task that your employer, your supervisor, manager wants you to do. But it has to be reasonable, right? It has to be reasonable. It can't be like, uh, like I said, if you, let's say you are working as, how do you say, in IT, like you're a programmer, I think. I don't think you're expected, if let's say you're in the IT department, you're like the tech guy, you're not expected to do something that is totally out of your job scope, right? Well, for example, in a company, there are different departments, right? Let's say your supervisor, your manager wanted you to do something that is out of your job scope, which is maybe sales. They want you to do something with sales. They want you to talk to clients, promote whatever product your company is selling. Is that reasonable? Does that sound reasonable to you? But regardless of whether it is a urgent matter or not, right? Doesn't sound reasonable, right? At all, no. So we have to look into the context. You can put in all those things like urgent matter and stuff you have to handle, but of course, again, job description is not just the only thing. We also have hours of work per day, week, all that stuff. So we have our obligation as employees, as workers, is only limited to what we are supposed, the hours we should be putting in a day or a week. So if your employer, if your boss tells you to do this thing after working hours, should you be doing it? Should you comply with whatever your employer is trying to instruct you to do, right? It's late at night, it's probably 9 or 10 p.m. and suddenly your boss calls you, you have to get this done by get this prepared by next morning or something. Is that reasonable, right? So again, if as long as you have a contract, as long as all these terms and conditions, the things that your employer instructs you to do that is outside of the agreement contract, you don't have to do it. It doesn't mean you're negligent. It doesn't mean you're not a good worker or a competent worker or anything like that. You're just doing what you have agreed previously. So thank you for the handpad, Dr. Marmot. Better whole face, yes. I think my Heroid model changed positions or something. That's why you're just patting my face. But yes, so that's that, right? Next, we have employment benefits. This is something that this is the thing that makes the crux of the entirety of a contract. How thick a contract is the employment benefits, right? So these are a few things that might contain inside a contract, right? But not necessarily. It would not necessarily will be there. All right. Sorry, I have a text. All right. So first off, we have salary increment. Okay. Sometimes a contract will specifically tell you what sort of increment and what exact numbers as in your salary has increased, but most of the time, right, they don't mention this at all. A lot of contracts don't mention this, but it doesn't mean it's bad, right? Sometimes we have to be reasonable, right? We can't be certain or if a company is doing good, is profiting or not, so there can't always be a salary or wage increase, right? But it's good to sometimes to have a sort of a base understanding. Maybe you could, instead of like being specific, or like when the times you do provide increment, how much increment would you be providing at minimum, something like that, right? There are contractors say at minimum they will provide a increment of maybe 2%, 3%. It's something, right? It's something. It's a bit of a certainty, but yeah. Then we have annual and medical leaves. These are I would say even some countries, all right, I can't say all countries, even if the contract doesn't say annual leaves or like medical leaves, these are basically the companies that should provide you day offs, right? I would say, yeah, some countries provide this. There's a basic minimum of annual leaves or medical leaves if the contract doesn't say it. And if the contract does say it, good for you, right? Good for you. But how do I say this? If the contract, if your employer doesn't have annual leaves or medical leaves stated in your contract, then something is definitely wrong, right? It raises a red flag. And we have insurance policies. Insurance policies is not compulsory. It's optional, as far as I know, depending on the size of a company, right? Not every company can afford like all employees with insurance, and depending on what kind of job that they are doing as well, whether they do require insurance as well. It depends on whether the job is dangerous or not, and what sort of environment they are working in, and what sort of situation that they would have to have insurance to cover them, right? What here it be ultimate. If you are too many, they will interview you on why so many. Wait, what do you mean by that, doctor? What ultimate? Also, what if contract started got increment but company doesn't have location for a period of year for increment? Is it allowed? If their contract has increment and they say they must provide you an increment, a minimum increment or something, then they have to, right? If not, they are breaching of contract. And that's very easy. It's very easy, very I would say fair for everyone. And they probably do provide a good contract will probably provide a situation where they would say something like, what if you don't receive salary increment? Even though in their contract they mentioned they will increase your salary increment. They should provide a reason for it, right? Too many medical leaves. I think some countries have unlimited medical leaves, right? Is that the case for you, Dr. Mahmoud? Because I think that's something some countries do have, unlimited medical leaves, which sounds very fair, right? Sounds very fair. Because at the end of the day, medical leaves are provided. Yes, yeah, you see, I knew it. Finland, supposedly the happiest country in the world. At the end of the day, medical leaves, the word leaves means you need to get approval by the company, but also at the same time, you need to get certified by a doctor to get the leave as well. So it would be understandable that medical leave shouldn't be limited, right? But of course, it is dependent on country between countries. I'm not even sure United States has laws that provide people minimum leaves. In Malaysia, we have, of course, definitely, depending on how many years you have worked in a company, you have a certain amount of leaves per year. Time to move to Finland. Supposedly, I see, supposedly. I'm guessing there's a lot of exceptions or like criteria in terms of that unlimited medical leave. Right. So yeah, then we have claims. This is also something that is optional. Sometimes not every job has it. Claims as in, if let's say you are traveling to somewhere else for work, and you probably can claim transport costs or hotel costs, living costs, all that stuff. Maybe you can claim. So it's highly dependent on the jobs you have. what you may claim, right? There's also things like dentist compensation. If let's say certain companies would provide dentist treatment, like basic cleaning and stuff, they also provide that sort of claim. So this is something, it may be there, maybe not, but do really look into your. I would say this is something that you have to research on, depending on what your job is, what industry you are in, right? If you have friends or family that are part of the same industry, see if they have any claims like that also, like that, which you're to check if your company yourself is providing or not. But yeah, here it's illegal to fine someone for being sick, so technically can't do much other than lower your work hours with a doctor's permission. Yeah, that's very, very nice. If we get sick here, I think in Malaysia for too long, there's a chance, employers, whether they know there are laws or not, they will still fire you. That's how, how in Malaysia it is like. I'm pretty sure in the United States as well, if you browse Reddit very often, you're gonna see all sorts of things people get fired for. Ridiculous things. Anyways, then we have bonuses. This is very common to have in a lot of contracts as well. Getting annual bonuses or quarterly bonuses, or for depending on how the company does, right? Again, this is something, even though it's inside a contract, most of the time it is like not compulsory. It's always like they have a very vague criteria for you to earn these bonuses. Most of the time it will say something like, depends on your performance of the year, depends on how much you've been working, what's the contribution you have brought to the company, or that stuff. Sometimes it's that vague, sometimes it's not that vague. For example, we have it's quite similar, sales commission, right? Bonus and sales commissions are similar in a sense, where there is, if let's say you are in the sales department, or your job is to provide as much clients for the company, and part of the clients you get paying to the company, part of the payment will be provided to you as commission or bonuses, depending on the quota or something like that, the goals that the company has set for you to reach. So that's that. And we have training programs. This is not necessary every job would have, right? If it depends on the complexity. The more complex the job is, more likely the company will provide you training, right? And that's one thing. I don't think I have anything to talk about that. Then we have overtime work, OT, as we always say. Companies don't like to have this in their agreement. They don't like to have OT put in their contracts, because a lot of jobs require people to work overtime. Like, for example, lawyers. All right? Lawyer's job inherently is impossible to complete any work within the 45 hours that we are provided now. Legally speaking, we should be only working for 45 hours per week only. But yeah, so this is something that is very dependent on the country, whether they have laws for employees to demand overtime payment from the employers. Most of the time, if you work more than you should be working, the hours you are working, you are not compensated. unfortunately. But if there are countries that do have laws about overtime, like in Malaysia, right now, anyone that is having a salary less than 4,000 ringgit, overtime, there are laws governing overtime. So if you are forced to work in public holidays or on days that you are not supposed to be working, or you may work or you may decline from working on those times, but if you do, you have to be paid, and there is a formula for it. You have to pay maybe like 2 times more, or 50% more, or 3 times more, something like that. But yeah, this is very dependent on whether you an employer won't have this in their contract. But if you have, good for you. If you don't, then you have to look into your country's laws to see whether there's something covering that. Here the law is to do overtime. You always have to have the worker's permission to put them overtime. Yeah, you have to have permission. That is the same for Malaysia, for certain for employees. But anyone that is earning more than 4,000 ringgit, which is like 1,000 euro, I think, yeah, 1,000 euro, very small amount. They don't have overtime. The law doesn't protect them for like overtime. So if they have to, if the contract does tell them they have to work overtime, yeah, you unfortunately you'll be working for free. If of course the contract says so. If the contract says that you're only supposed to work 45 hours or like that, which I believe in Malaysia as well, right? You're supposed to only work for 45 hours, but I think like the basic 8 hours per day doesn't reach 40, too much of that. So yeah, you can still work overtime for a bit. Oh, we are breaching the law. We are being illegal. But that's Malaysia. Anyways, let's move on. So we also, in a contract or together with the contract, a company or employer will also provide things like policies and rules for you to learn to comply with. This is probably a very, very big document, or non-existent, depending on the company or how big the company you are working in, right? I personally don't have something like that. Most of the policies and rules I have in my workplace was tapered all over the office on A4 papers, like on windows, on your table. Those are the policies and rules we have when I work. But for like much larger companies, they will always have a book or have a PDF for you to read through all their rules and policies that they might not be able to cover or for each individual, right? For example, they might even put in employment benefits inside this sort of company policies as well together, so that all the benefits are same for every employee. So that's how one way they might be doing it. Or the other is dress codes, hygiene, professionalism, all that stuff would be put inside this policy and rules. Nothing wrong with that, but do take note to read all this as well. It might hide something very important inside all these things. And when, as they say, when things go very, very wrong and you thought you're in the right, but unfortunately something inside the policies or rules cover this situation, and you are unable to get any compensation or get anything claimed from the employer if they did something supposedly wrong. So that's something that they are very sneaky about. Some companies at least. Then of course, very, very important, last but not least, termination or resignation procedures. Very important, right? like any like any other relationships, right? A job doesn't last forever. You won't stay with a company forever. So it's very important to know how to, leave a company without any sort of a problem, without risking yourself for any lawsuits or something like that, or getting taken advantage of as well. A lot of times cases happen in disputes between employers and employees is this, right? When things go sour, the relationship goes sour, you don't like me, I don't like you, I want to quit, or you want to fire me. This is the time where it gets very messy. Feelings might get mixed into it. So yeah, termination and resignation procedures are very important. I'll talk about it more in detail later. Yes, there's always that tiny bits. Yes. All right. So now, then we have, so moving on away from, terms and conditions. At the beginning, when you get interviewed, right? You might get only one interview and then immediately they are considering hiring you, or you might get second interview, third interview, or whatever it is, right? You get shortlisted. If they say they are going to hire you and they want you to start working on this date, on such, always, don't go to work, or at least, if you decided you want to go to work over there, you are preparing to go to work on this date they have told you to do so. Let them know that you want a contract, you want an agreement signed, provide you, of course, to be provided to you to look through first. That's very important, right? This is something that happens very often. I'm not sure in other places, but in Malaysia it happens a lot, right? Some companies are very desperate. You don't know why that they are desperate, but they will immediately tell you to start working on a very, very short notice, maybe next week or next month, like that. And they don't provide you an agreement or contract for you to sign until you start working, which is not professional, in my opinion. Not professional at all, and also very, very sus. As in, they are telling you to work, but you have no idea what any details, any how I would say confirmed and agreed details of your job. That is very important, all right? That is very important for you to know all this before you start working, because once you get into that office and work for a period of time, essentially by your actions and by the employer actions, you're considered an employee already. You have a contractual relationship with them, albeit that despite that you don't have an actual contract yet, right? So that's something you have to consider, all right? It's not like, oh, you don't have contract, you can just leave anytime you like. Nope. Depending on your country's laws, there might be legal consequences or automatic consequences for you to just simply quit, right? So that's that, right? So again, if they do provide you agreements, right? If they do provide you an agreement or contract, don't sign it immediately. As in, if let's say first interview, they had a good impression of you in their interview, and immediately on the spot they tell you, I like you, I want to hire you. We'll be immediately preparing the contract for you to sign now. Just wait for a moment, all right? Now, are you supposed to sign that contract? I mean, with any rationally thinking right now, right? Of course, anyone would be like, of course, I wouldn't sign it. who in the right mind would sign it, right? Sign a contract that was just freshly printed out of their office and to sign it. It's very very, I would say, unprofessional as well for an employer to do that. But a lot of employees do not know this, right? They do not know what's the norm, right? It's not normal for a company to immediately hire someone and get them to sign a contract. Yeah, right? That's one thing, right? And if you sign anything, if you've not checked properly, if you've not read thoroughly, at the end of the day, it's going to be, if something goes bad, if the employer does something bad to you, being unfair to you, and that unfairness is not considered unfairness because it's written inside in the contracts, and it's your fault for not reading the contract properly, right? Because in contractual laws, signing your signature on any document is foolproof, or almost like it can say 99% guarantee is considered yes, you have agreed all the terms and conditions, regardless if you understand the language, regardless if it doesn't make sense to you, but regardless it is unfair or not. You have signed it, you've agreed to everything on it, right? Everything is enforceable in it unless your country's laws says it's not. So that's the thing, right? That's the thing to be careful of. Yeah, so reasonable time should be provided through an agreement, contract, regardless if it can be negotiated or not. So yeah, even if the company tells you, why do you want to read it? It's standard or something like that. They will tell you all sorts of reasons. It's standard, or it can't be changed. It's fixed for everyone. Everyone has accepted the same terms and conditions, all that stuff. No, that's not a valid reason for you to sign anything, right? People have signed it. That's their discretion, not you, right? You're not everyone. You're not. So that's something, all right? And also, it doesn't matter if it can be negotiated or not negotiated. As long as you don't agree to the terms, and you very, very don't agree to it, you should not sign it. It should not, be pressured to sign anything, right? If let's say a company tells you, oh, if you don't sign this now, I won't hire you, or anything like that, that's really bad, really unprofessional as well. If they threaten you like that, I would consider this sort of like a threatening, although not in any way financially or physically or anything like that. But it is considered a threat, right? So to say, oh, if you don't sign this now, I will hire you. It's like trying to scare you into, oh, you won't get a job, you won't get a salary now, you won't have a stable life or anything like that. That's how I feel when people say things like that. Oh, you won't get a job now if you don't sign this. No, don't give in to any of this sort of duress or any pressure. All right. Of course, a few more advice I can give for people is consult friends and family, if not a lawyer, whether the terms and conditions are fair and legally enforceable. So yeah, if you can't hire a lawyer, you don't have a lawyer friend, at least you have friends, right? Or have family that you can, talk about these things, discuss about these things. Most likely your brother, your older or older sister, your parents have worked before in their life. If they are quite cautious of contracts, all right, good, very good, ask them. So don't just ask one person, ask multiple people on their opinions, right? Regardless if you think this contract is fair, is reasonable. Sometimes we can't see everything on our own. Sometimes we need people to we need a different perspective to look into things. Be critical in certain things, right? That's why if anyone can trust me, if people trust me to look into their contract, I will. I'll help look into it. I'll see if there's any problem with it. I'll tell you as it is. I won't sugarcoat it. All right. That's actually my experience. My job experience actually is to scrutinize terms and conditions, whether it's like for a sales contract, or it's a employment contract, or it's a business contract. You have to look into everything. Agree. Ask for more eyes and opinions. Yes, that's the thing I made a mistake of, I would say. When I first started out as in my chambering apprenticeship, I didn't. First off, I immediately accepted the job. My first mistake. Although I can't. I was so naive that time. Right, my first interview of a law firm, I thought wouldn't be accepted or anything, but if I got accepted, I got hired, and immediately it gave me a contract to sign. I only read it briefly and signed it. I thought it should be fine, right? But no, it turns out to be the worst hellhole I ever been in. Oh man, it provided great experience at least. Right. Next, okay, at last would say, yeah, this is, I would say, not really a guide or a advice from a lawyer, more of a in general, a person, if you're working, right, or something like that you need to be careful of. How do you find out if an employer is good or bad for you? Simply look for reviews, right? There's so many different websites now. There's so many connections that you probably can find to look into a company, a employer's background, see if they are treating their employees fairly, respectfully, and such. So that's something that you have to do as well. I actually had a video. I made a video talking about this in regards to what you call payment, salary transparency, something like that. Where you should be finding out whether a company is paying you at the appropriate market value or something like that. But yeah, anyways, that's it for this first part. So we're moving on to when you get a job, when you're working, what are the things that you need to be careful of? Oh boy. And this is also a bunch of things I would be briefly mentioning, but yeah, you think that was a lot? This is also a lot as well. So while being employed, all right, most of the time there is going to be something like a probation period for a lot of people, right? Where in this probation period, you could say it's like the testing period, like the testing of the waters for both you and the employer, right? This is where, depending on the probation period, maybe it's 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, you work there, probably train as well, and after the probation period, then you'll be confirmed as a full employee of such. You'll be granted the full benefits or claims or whatever of a employee under the contract. Normally it would be like that, right? But of course, do understand that even in probation period, you are still an employee, right? you're not a part-timer, you're not anything like that, you're not a freelancer or like a volunteer worker or anything. During the probation period, you are still an employee, and depending on the different country, on the country that you live in, right, as long as you're an employee, the laws that are applicable to you, you are still protected under them, right? You still have employment rights, right? Next, we have you are only obligated to work as per what was agreed in your agreement contract with the employer. So again, I've said this all over again in the first part of this live seminar. But yeah, while you're working, right? While you're working, your employer, your boss, is going to ask you to do all sorts of things. If they are like they're like a terrible boss, yes, they will be doing that, micromanaging you, doing things that, restricting you from doing this, that, and such, or even stripping away benefits from you and all that. So again, whatever you must do, whatever you have to do as a employee, should be provided all under your contract, right? So I've said here, amount of work, type of work, place of work, reaching deadlines, all this stuff should be inside your contract, right? If let's say there's no deadlines, normally there won't be deadlines mentioned in your contract. It's safe to assume that reasonable, effort should be put into any sort of a project or sort of a task to be completed, right? We always have the, it's basically, how do you gauge this is from other people's performance. If you're given a task similar or the same as another person, another colleague, a co-worker, you have to look in at how much time do they take to finish a task. If a day's worth of time is what they need to finish, is how much they need to use to finish a task, then that would be the reasonable time to finish a task, right? If let's say what would be an unreasonable would be anything that is impossible or unreasonable, which other people won't even able to finish on time as well, right? I've seen this happen, prop up as a question, as a issue with a lot of workers as well, with a lot of friends, family, where their boss tell them to finish a project, finish a issue, resolve a issue within a very, very short period of time. But if you are experienced, right? If you are experienced, you will know, or at least you have friends that are experienced, you will know that certain deadlines are not reasonable. I would say that's the only way for you to find out, right? Because most of the time in a contract, it will say something like, you need to perform your work reasonably or on time or without delay, or without negligence, without making mistakes, and such and such. And so most of the time, putting this is very vague. When you have nothing to you have nothing to rely on in the contract to say what is reasonable. So at least in the legal terms, right? In the reasonable for us, right? In a lot of cases, we use reasonable. It means someone else, another lay person, another average person with the average skill, or at least the same skill or same job position, is able to perform at what time, at what efficiency. That's normally how we gauge things. So yeah, if anytime you find that your employers are giving you unreasonable instructions, demands, that's the only way for you to find out, unfortunately. And next we have, if it's not in your agreement, you're not breaching employment terms for not following any employer's unreasonable instructions or demands. Yes, again, if you don't follow these employers' instructions and such, it's not a breach of contract. You just can't do it, right? You just can't do it with whatever they are demanding. If they ask you to jump off a cliff, would you do that, right? To be very, very, extreme, would you jump, or would you drive dangerously if your boss wanted you to do so, right? If they ask you to reach this job location within a specific time period, like less than 1 hour, but when you look at your GPS, your Waze, or your Google Maps, Google Maps tell you it have to take you 3 hours to reach there. Impossible, right? So really, yeah. So next we have, make sure to understand if you are being harassed, sexually or not sexually, in any way whatsoever while working. So this is, I would say, clear cut, or not really clear cut, because harassment in office is still a common occurrence, whether or not it's serious or it's not serious, it's menial or not, it happens, right? So I would say the problem sometimes, a lot of times, is employees don't recognize that the things that are done while in a working environment is considered harassment or not. This is something I would say you have to talk to people about this, right? A lot of times, human nature, right, at least for me, we tolerate a lot of things. We tolerate a lot of bad things that happen to us, and we just shrug it off as a fun joke, or just fooling around, making a prank, or saying just having a casual discussion or something like that, or friendly banter or whatever. But a lot of times, we do feel when we do feel uncomfortable, we don't take actions on it because we don't know if it's wrong or right. So I would say best way to find out if this whatever people are doing is considered harassment or not is talking to people, if not within your within your working space, someone from outside of it, right? Your friends, your family, do so, right? Because harassment, most of the time when harassment happens, right, they are either civilly or criminally wrong in most countries, right? Sexual harassment, definitely criminal, right? But if, let's say, you are being harassed in the sense of getting annoyed, just being disrespectful of you every time a person just disrespects you, or like humiliates you, shames you very often, regularly, or something like that, that's called harassment as well, right? Or even if, let's say, it's not like verbal harassment, right? It could be things like getting harassed in terms of your job, where you're being given tasks, unreasonable amount of tasks to do, or the location of your job, the location of your work keeps changing, the requirements keeps changing, the criteria keeps changing, all that stuff, right? Could be considered harassment as well by your supervisor, by your manager, or anyone from the management department, right? Without any actual proper reason for doing all this stuff, right? And it doesn't matter who, right? It doesn't matter who the person is harassing. If you get harassed, it is the employer's responsibility to rectify the situation. If it's an employee, if it's a colleague, a coworker that's harassing you, the company should do something about it. Either, reporting them to the police, or actually, taking disciplinary action against them, firing them, all that stuff. An employer can't say that, it's not me, so I don't have to do anything. And especially when the harassment is are done by themselves. If that is the case, then unfortunately you have to take measures on your own. All right. Then we have next one, which is, I would say, also very common in certain working environments, in certain job industries as well. Unsafe conditions in your working environment should be considered, right? If let's say you're working in a restaurant, so we have things that a company, a business owner should have things like SOPs, standard of procedures, to prevent diseases, illnesses from spreading, right? A place has to be clean, a place has to be free from any sort of what you call pests, and sanitary standards, right? Food has to be clean, has to be fresh, nothing should be rotten. Anything that is rotten, it should be thrown away. If things are set at a place for too long, or depending on where the food are stored, all that stuff, all those things needs to be considered, right? And equipments are maintained, clean, all those stuff is very, very important in a restaurant. Of course, there are other things, other different working environments as well. Like if you're working on construction, construction work, right? Building apartments or offices, where it is very dangerous. All the safety measures, all right? Safety measures for using any tools, machines, devices have to be implemented, right? Working in a factory, most commonly as well. All these things, very important. And as long as it is within the employer's control, right? If the employer can foresee that they should be providing all these safety measures, providing all these procedures to make sure the employee is safe, right? Safe from physical harm, mental harm, financial, even maybe financial harm, but not really. We are focusing more physical and mental harm here, right? Now, health of an employee is very important. All this, sometimes by law, right? I'm not so certain on this, but at least in Malaysia, right, there are laws making it compulsory that for companies to take all these safety measures. If they don't, they are violating laws. Could be criminal in nature, right? Could be jailed for it. And it's, I would say, these sort of things, unsafe conditions, normally you won't find this in contracts. They won't state any of these things in their terms and conditions. It's more or less to be expected, depending on the type of work that you do, right? If let's say you're working in a factory, it's expected you should provide workers with the necessary equipment, safety equipment. You don't have to list out that the employer must provide a safety helmet, a safety vest, or circuit. I'm not sure any safety devices to be implemented. All these things shouldn't be provided in contract. Should be implied to have in a workplace. So those are the things I would say while you're working, to be taken into consideration, right? Then we have, all right, we're almost at the end, but we still have still some things to talk about. So once you work for maybe 5 years, a decade, or however long, maybe 1 year, even just 1 year, and you decide to resign, or you decide, or the employer decides to terminate you. So there are a few things that you probably should look into, or should be careful of, right? Typically, all right, typically when you resign, or when a employer fires you, right, there is, again, which I mentioned, there should be a clause talking about how it is done, right? How the resignation is done, or how the termination is done. And as long as you follow all those things, right, written inside the in your contract, you should be fine, right? You should be fine. There won't be any sort of like legal repercussion that you might face, right? People like to, resign because, that seems to be a lot of how movies are depicted, or dramas, or TV shows are depicted, when a person can't stand it anymore and they just suddenly I quit and all that stuff, very dramatic and such, and very power to the individual. But I would say this is very, very dangerous. All right, don't do that, right? Whether you want to like tell your employer or your boss in the face you want to quit, or you just want to quietly quit, it's all the same, right? There are legal consequences. Of course, depending on this depends on the countries, and some countries allow you to do whatever you like in terms of how you want to quit a job. But we'll talk about it in a sec. Oh. So yeah, normally, all right, that's the most basic thing in a termination clause would tell you that you have to do is give a notice, a termination notice, to the other party, that telling them you want to resign, right? You want to leave the company. However you word it, it's considered a termination notice, right? And inside that termination notice is always telling them that when the period starts and when it ends, right? This is very common, right? Very common for a lot of companies, where, at least in Malaysia, to put in to say, I will work for another 3 months, 2 months, or 1 month, and then after that I'll leave the company, right? Normally that's the basic procedure that you only have to do. There are other things that you need to do, but we'll talk about it in a sec. For now, if let's say during this termination notice, right, there are two situations that might happen that are bad. Okay, if you are able to serve the termination notice, you're able to work 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, depending on how your contract has worded it, fine, that's good, all right. Nothing should there shouldn't be any problems arising out of it. But if let's say if you don't serve a termination notice when a contract does have a notice that you must serve, then you are voluntarily not completing the notice period. And a lot of times people don't notice is that a notice period, if you don't serve it, the other thing that you have to do is actually pay for it, right? Whether you are an employee, you have to serve the entire notice, or if you don't, you have to pay for the remainder of the time that you have not served. This may vary between country to another country, all right? Just have to caution people on this. might not be necessarily the case. Some maybe there are laws behind it to not to make sure this type of clause is not possible. As in, yeah, if you don't serve the notice period, then that's the end of the story, or something like that. But from my understanding, this is pretty fair. I would say this is fair, regardless of whether it's the employee or the employer that needs to pay. This is pretty fair, right? There are reasons why there's a termination notice, but after I'll explain in a moment, right? So if it's not you that's voluntarily not completing the termination period, then it would be the other way around. Your employer, your boss, doesn't want you to work in the office anymore. That's another thing that also happens very often as well, right? Regardless if you serve a notice or not. The boss just doesn't want you to work anymore. They don't want you in the office. They don't want you in a working premise. Can they do that? They can, provided they follow the terms and conditions in the contract, right? Again, they are the one, since the employer are the one not letting you to serve the termination notice, they are the one who should pay you for the notice not completed. Am I clear? Am I understood? So yeah, what's the reason why there's a termination notice, right? What's the reason why there's a termination notice? I can tell you that there's one very basic reason is why there's such a thing is it benefits both parties in a sense, right? For the employee, for you as the worker, right? The benefit is that you still get paid, right? You still get paid for the period, for the termination period. And while you're getting paid for the termination period, whether it's 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, or more, right? During that time, you can comfortably plan and prepare to find a different job. You can, you probably can take time off to go to interviews, job interviews, find another job, or if you already found a job, take time prepared to, you know, maybe you have to move out to a different place, different location to work on in your new place, in your new job. So that's a reason, one of the reasons a termination period is good for an employee, so that you have time to prepare, but at the same time you won't be unemployed and you're also getting payment while you're moving away, right? As for the employer, as for the boss, why is it good for them to have a notice period, termination period, is that during this time, they know that since they know that you are leaving the company, for this period of time, they won't be held suddenly like losing a labor force, a job position they needed to fill in. They maybe it's not important, maybe it's important, but anyways, it will affect their operation, right? It will affect their business operation if you just suddenly leave. So with a given termination period, right, they have the time to look for other people. They have the time to post up job advertisements. They have the time to do interviews, all that stuff. So it's very, how do you say, it's a very rational clause. I would say it's a very rational clause to have inside a contract, right? To have a termination period. What's not rational is not having a termination period, termination clause like this. All right, but that's for later. So yeah, other than serving a period of time, uh, when you're resigning or getting terminated, of course there are other things you might have to be you're obligated to do. The contract might tell you to do things like return company assets, right? Access cards, keys, office supplies, tools, devices, even maybe books, laptops, even, or maybe they provided you a car, company car or something like that. You have to return all those things as well. And also they might also ask you to complete any transference as well. If let's say the new hire, the person that is going to replace you is starting to work while you're still doing your termination period, right? Your notice period. You might be obligated to transfer all your tasks to this new person, and as well as supervise or guide or train this new person as well, right? That might be provided inside your contract as well, that you have to do all these things. But again, your obligation to do all these things is only limited to your notice period. If let's say you are unable to transfer everything after your time is up, you're not supposed to stay there, can continue and transfer all those things. All right, that is the company's problem at the end. Okay, so good, I hope so. All right, we're almost at the end. There's only a few things I want to add on only. So that's from the start to the end of how whatever things you should be careful of, think about, consider in a when you're working, right? There might be a lot of more niche things that I haven't talked about, but if you think there is something I haven't covered or anything, you can ask me now, or if you're watching this VOD, you can ask me in the comments, all right, as well. I will look into all these questions and see if I can help you, right? So other things to note, all right, any clause that requires employees to compensate the employer for a breach of contract is not common and often illegal in most countries. So this is something you may see or you may not see. If you see terms like this, it's a really, really big red flag, okay? Companies aren't supposed to ask compensation from employees ever. At least in the most common cases where minor mistakes or mistakes that happen because of negligence on the employee side cause some sort of a loss for the company and such, doesn't mean an employee should pay for them, right? There should be disciplinary actions taken against the employee for making mistakes, right? But they are not usually the one should be held responsible for compensation or anything, for a lot of reasons, right? For a lot of reasons. One is that if the company does that, who is going to start working for them, right? Anyone who works for them, who works for this company, work for this employer, is always going to be afraid that they are going to make a mistake and that will cost their livelihood, right? Because a lot of times when these companies demand employees compensation, it's not a small amount, relatively speaking, right? So yeah, but again, highly dependent on how these clauses are worded. Sometimes they might just say reduce salary, which is still illegal, right? A lot of times this is illegal. You can't just simply reduce a person's salary for no reason, or reduce employment benefits, this is possible, right? A possibility that they can reduce benefits, right? Sometimes most benefits are not covered by law, so they can remove them as a disciplinary punishment, disciplinary action against you, right? Or outright demand for payment. This is totally, I would say 90% illegal for employers to demand payment for a mistake that the employee made, right? I would say these are the few things that are very common, or at least will show up when it does show up, right? And normally it's always about loss of profits, damaged properties, assets due to employee negligence. If there is such a clause inside in any employment contract, you should not sign it, all right? You should not sign it and talk to people about it, all right? So yeah, that's one thing. Is there anything else I would like to add on this? Yeah, so reduce salary or reduce employment benefits, all this is such, I would say, if let's say an employee has done something very, very wrong, maybe even up to like gross negligence or something like that, or fraud, doing some sort of fraudulent act, scamming people, or other sort of what's it called? Oh my goodness, I've forgotten what the word is. Let me see if I can look it up. Criminal breach of trust. Sorry, criminal breach of trust. Things like that, of that nature, of that serious nature. It's either even at that stage, right? Disciplinary actions. It can't be reduce salary or like reduce employment benefits, all that stuff. Most of the time, if these things happen, there are laws behind it. Sometimes it just says saying that the employee should be immediately terminated, or if they are not confirmed yet, right? All these accusations against the employee is not confirmed. There must be how do you say, due diligence done. There must be investigations done, and during those investigations, right, the most that a employer can do against their workers, right, is postpone payment, postpone salary, right? They can't totally just how do you say, not pay them and still let them work, right? So when these payments are postponed, it means that these workers, these employees are not working at all. As I recall, at least in Malaysia, it's maybe like 2 weeks time. I'm not sure it goes up to 1 month, but there is a time period that the employee cannot work and won't be receiving any salary during those time while the investigations are ongoing, right? That's what I understand, or at least what I have read, right? Remembered that we're talking about stop paying a employee. That is most likely the situation where employee can only do. All right. Anyhow, so that's one other thing I would talk about. So now we have one final thing. All right, one final thing I want to mention is at will employment. Right, I don't know why there's a huge space here. At will employment is a United States thing, but of course it also means that employees without contracts agreement with an employee, right? So if you don't have a contract, this is what you are called, right? At will employment. But for my own personal reasons, I have to tell people I don't I don't agree. I don't encourage people to not have an agreement, not having a contract while you're working, right? Whether it's for a small company or a big company, not having a contract is way worse, right? In terms of having rights and benefits. And so I gave a couple of reasons, right? Employees only derive rights from existing laws that are applicable to them. So if let's say we're talking about United States, right? The only laws you have is not much, right? I tried looking this up. Maybe it differs from state to state, but at the federal level, there's nothing like the employment laws in Malaysia, where a lot of things are covered, right? A lot of things are covered when you don't have a contract, right? At least in Malaysia, we have more rights that is protected under law. But for United States, a lot of those things are not apparent, right? For example, annual leaves, medical leaves, salary payments on when it should be paid, right? At a reasonable time, like within 7 days or something like that, or overtime, or public holidays. All those things, I probably have to look into further, but I don't see it when I first research on this on the United States. But yes, that's an example of why contracts are very important, right? They provide you contractual rights, right? Although they are not like law rights or like how do I say, rights that are like more powerful in quoted bracket, how do I say? Oh shit, man. Sorry, man. I'm getting tongue-tied. But yeah, at least you have contractual rights that tell you exactly what you have for both you and the employer, right? And again, because if let's say you only have at will, you don't have a contract, you don't have rights from laws, that is fine at all, but do you know your rights in existing laws, in the laws that you in your country? If you don't, I would say that's practically the same as having no rights at all, because if you don't know what your rights, right, are in your country, employment rights in your country, your employer doesn't know as well. It's safe to assume your employer doesn't know what employment rights you have as well, because they're going to do their best to profit, to exploit your labor force, right? So you won't even know if they are doing anything right or wrong. That's the thing, right? So that's the problem over there. Then we have again, why would an employer want to, if let's say that even if there are laws governing employees, why would they want to implement these things in their relationship with you? Because there's no contract, right? The only thing I can say is your day-to-day relationship with your boss. So that's another thing. They don't have a reason to have it, as long as they benefit from not having a contract. That's why I say, due to power disparity, right? Employees are always in a better bargaining position in this situation, right? So employer inherently has a better financial position, better bargaining position to negotiate what you should be doing or shouldn't be doing while you're working, and the authority as well, right? Because they are authoritative figures. You always think they have more power, they always think they have more experience, more knowledge, better than employees. So whatever they say, you might actually believe that it's right, even if it's unfair. To my understanding, it is indeed different depending on state. Mandatory breaks are an easy example. Yeah. So yeah, I would say different from state to states. United, from what I understand, the Americans' legal system is that it's similar to Malaysia. We have a federal state where we have all the laws at federal state applies to every state, right? Then we have like states, which certain laws are only applicable to each state. We are like that. But the thing is, our laws, most of it is covered at the federal level. So it's not a lot of things at the state level is very, how do you say, broad or covering, right? At most, it's very specific situations, specific industries, specific locations where these state laws are applicable, right? For example, maybe the parking laws or the car street laws and such, or park laws, or like national park, agricultural, or even religious laws are very, very state specific. But anything like employment is always fixed at a federal level. So yeah. Unfortunately, even if you have laws in your states, right? Again, if you don't know them, it's as if it doesn't exist, because you would never like, suddenly you were like, you're doing something wrong, illegal, or you're doing something illegal in the state. You would not think like that, because you would not know what laws you have in your state, right? And if, let's say, you are a person who knows about laws and state laws, and are, how do you say, considerate of what your rights are, you probably will not choose a job that doesn't have a contract to begin with, right? You probably find one that is much safer, much stable, for you to work at for a long period of time, right? A lot of sometimes the reasons why there are people still prefer at-will employments is because they are not working for long. They're probably working as a part-timer, that's understandable. Maybe they are working for a month-to-month basis, and if you don't like it, they will jump to a different job. But again, I would say there is your discretion, your life, your freedom, but very unstable. If, let's say, you're thinking of putting food on the table, also this music is always weird. Let's just move. All right, so as much as I want to say, keep talking about that, let's move on. What is promised by employers to the employees in the past can be forgone as it was not in writing. So I'm getting to the specifics why this is a bad idea. Is because everything you talk to each other, right, to your boss, when what you're getting paid, what your working hours are, what you should be doing in your job, what's your job scope, what benefits you have, all that stuff is part of, you could say, if it's in some form of written statement, fine, right? Fine. If, let's say, it's being all these promises are made through messages, at least you have something, right? At least you have something. Let's say they promise something to you that you can actually provide as proof, provide as evidence. But if the times that they just say, they just promise to you verbally, they talk to you about it, like they promise you to give you a raise, they give you a bonus or something like that, and the next month they say, oops, I forgot. They can say that, and there's no way for you to prove that they ever promise you that will give you some benefit or bonus or a raise and such. That's how this is how a person without contract is unfortunately going to be like. I have a situational question. What if you are tendering for 3 months and the months of your last employment have an event at the end of the month? Do you need to attend the event? For all intents and purposes, right? Even if for when you're serving your termination period, your notice period, you're still an employee. Everything your job obligations is still the same. If inside your job application, your description, responsibilities and such requires you to attend meetings, attend events and such, you should, right? It doesn't. Yeah. Again, unless some weird way that once you've submitted your termination period, it says you can't do this, you can't access this database, you can't access this server or go to this place or such, then you probably don't have to go. Or, of course, your boss tells you can't go. If your boss tells you can't go, then you can't go then, right? So there's that, right? Now, I don't think that's, unless, why would you think how do you say, unless you don't want to go, your boss wants you to go but you don't want to go, doesn't change your job description either way, or job responsibilities. Yeah, so I said here, difficult to prove, hard to gather evidence of such promises. And now, so I said, employers can and will demand and instruct employees of matters that were not previously agreed. Yeah, so again, at will employments, because you don't have any job descriptions or responsibilities specified, your boss can tell you to do whatever you like, right? The only thing you can, try to argue is your job position, right? If you work as a receptionist, then you probably have a vague idea, or there may be case laws, like previous cases that have decided that what are the responsibilities of a receptionist, and that is within the job scope. That's pretty much it, right? But yeah, unfortunately, without a contract, you have no idea. They could tell you to scrub the toilets, clean the toilet, clean the aircon, air conditioner, buy food for the company, for the office, do errands for the company. It could be a receptionist job, because you did. Why? Because we didn't say anything we didn't put it in writing. So yeah, unfortunately that's that. And also another, again, I think I just said that no job stability in relation to the employer's obligation for the employee, right? So I've mentioned that you might sometimes get benefits, you might sometimes be able to get claims, you might get leaves, or might not be able to get leaves, or raise, all that stuff. There's no certainty in your job, right? But other than maybe you're doing this as a part-time, like not really serious in pursuing a career out of the job that you are doing, then yeah, I guess there is some pros to it, working without a contract. But other than that, if in any other situation where you want to work for a long period of time, like in the long term, you want to work for a company, you want to work for a employer for years and years, right? A contract is very, very important, regardless, all right? Regardless of how you think, without a contract, you will be more free. Like, right? I see that some people would argue that, because I don't have a contract, I can just leave a place whenever I like. Yeah, that's pretty much the only benefit I can think of. That you can leave anytime you like, and for any reason whatsoever. But I do also have to point out, your employer can fire you for any reason that you like, they want as well. For any reason they want as well, and without any termination benefits to you as well, right? I've talked about the termination period, right? Why it's important for people to have it, because so that your employer doesn't just suddenly fire you for no reason, right? Even if there's no reason, right? Yeah, sometimes employer can do that. They can fire you for no reason. But what they can't do, in most cases with a termination period or with laws protecting an employee, is that they can't fire you immediately. They can't terminate you immediately, dismiss you, or whatever, however you want to call it. They have to, if they want to do that, right? Most laws says that you have to have a strong reason, a very, very good reason to fire a person on the spot, right? Most time maybe it's because they did something criminal while they are working, right? As I said, the criminal breach of trust. Maybe they misused funds of the company. They try to do scams. They fraud people while they are working. They are working on behalf of, representing on behalf of the company. All that stuff is very serious mistakes, or not mistakes, serious actions that would cost their job, would also justify an immediate dismissal, an immediate termination of their employment. Those are only exceptional circumstances where, you know, an employer is able to do that. Most of the time, when they fire you, when they terminate you, they can, but they have to go through how do you say, the termination notice period, right? That's pretty much very, very fair to everyone. And because an at-will worker doesn't have this sort of a benefit, you are always at the whim of your employer. The employer can anytime, if he doesn't like your face, if he doesn't like your face, they will fire you. They will, and they can do it anytime they like. They don't even have to tell you why. It could be some racist reason or discriminatory reason, but they don't have to tell you why, right? Right, even though also thank you for the hydrate rave. Even if, let's say, yes, in United States, like you have discrimination against racism, sexism, religious, all that stuff, right? If they don't tell you why they fired you, how are you going to find out? How are you going to say they did fire you because of this? Hard to prove, right? If they are really being careful. There's a lot of ways to exploit this. A lot more ways for the employer to exploit an at-will employment compared to an employee. So there's that. Anyhow, that's pretty much it, as much as I want to talk about. Unless anyone has any further questions, I'll end the recording portion of this VOD. So anyone that's watching in the future, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to put it down in the comments. And if you like what you see, maybe give it a like to the video and subscribe. All right, guys. Oof.